Okay, well, my name is Nana. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for being here. I know it's late for you, so we so appreciate it.
Thank you, no problem.
Of course. I just want to start off by saying thank you because your film is an education, but I also think it's an invitation. I think it's easy to watch a film like Attica and think, that happened 50 years ago, that was then, but the same themes are here today. And so I thank you for your film and for its timelessness. So to get started, can you talk about how the film came together? And then how you two came together for it?
Yeah, I mean, I had been thinking about Attica and making a film about Attica, I don't know, for 30 years or so. And maybe 3, 4 years ago, I realized that, now was probably the last best chance to make the film. That the guys who were in the yard, even if they were young at the time, which many of them were really starting to get old. And the film, if I was ever going to make the film, I needed to make the film now. So we started out, we got a little bit of money and made a sizzle reel, sizzle reel, and then kind of shopped it around, and Showtime saw the sizzle reel and bought into the film. At that point, it became kind of a reality that we were going to make the film. And Traci and I had worked on 2 other films that are kind of right in a row. And I approached Traci about working on Attica.
And how long was the process in total from start to finish, including research?
2 years, maybe, Traci? I don't know. Was it about 2 years?
More or less, yeah. To include all the before stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was slightly delayed because we were about to. I think it was in April. I can't remember years, partially because of COVID, and partially because it's midnight. But I guess 2008, and we were about to shoot, and COVID struck in March. And so that delayed us and slowed us down. And you should know that the whole film was produced and shot during the time of COVID. So it was a little bit stretched out after that.
The film feels like, is a 360-degree view in terms of who you chose to interview. You have the inmates, you have the families of the guards, people who lived in the town of Attica, etc. Did you always know who you wanted to interview, or did that kind of start to unfold as you were interviewing people?
Yeah, I think in the early, in the early stages of researching the story, it became very apparent that it would be necessary in order to really do justice to the story and all the various aspects of it and all the different, lives who were touched by it, that it would be necessary to talk to those people. It was very clear that we needed to obviously speak to the prisoners. It was very clear that we needed to speak to the people that lived in this place, because we wanted to also give an understanding that Attica, before there was Attica the prison, there was Attica Village, which is a community, and that, as you see in the film, is intimately tied with the prison, the life of this town, not only as an economic driver, but just culturally. You hear children of the guards in the film talk about your neighbors were prison guards, your father, his father, and this was a point of pride for these people. So we knew that we wanted to tell that story. Obviously, the observers, the media was a huge part of it. So yeah, we certainly set out to talk to every single person and every single type of person whose lives were touched by what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we knew early on that we wanted to tell a 360-degree story, but we didn't know who was going to tell that story. We didn't know. We felt that there were 1,000 prisoners in the yard, that there would be former prisoners that we could find. We didn't know if we could get the townspeople to talk to us. Certainly, we didn't know that so many of the observers would be still alive. Clarence Jones and Herman Schwartz and others. But they ended up agreeing, and John Johnson, the reporter, and they were great.
We hear or we learn the perspectives of Nixon, Rockefeller, some other key folks during this time. But I'm curious, in your research, what did you learn about the world's perception, or what was happening globally in terms of Attica?
I think that at some point, if we went back, to the original interviews and the original thoughts, we had kind of thought about including more of what was going on in the world, in the outside, but we had 2 hours to tell the story, and so a lot of that dropped by the wayside. I think was really important was that in the section where we talk about the prison conditions before Attica, that we talk about the fact that the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, Malcolm X, the Black Muslims, were their ideas and philosophies were not only spreading around the country, but also into the prison system.
And how did you make your way through all of the archival footage? Was there kind of a system that you used to filter through everything?
Yeah, we had our fantastic co-producer, Sushana Dubray, set up a computer system, basically, to organize all of the footage, where we could sort of search through the days by subject matter. But certainly that also required all of us actually looking at and watching many hours of footage, a fraction of which the best that we had that you see in the film. But she did an absolutely amazing job at organizing all that, so it was easily accessible throughout the project.
And I think also it mattered not only of looking at the footage, but re-looking at the footage and looking at the footage, because as you start making the film, the footage needs change, and the significance of different shots change, so that when the helicopters go over the walls for the first time on the last day, there's this wonderful shot that I love where a bunch of the hostage families, the women kind of look up in the sky at the helicopter. Well, when you go through it the first time, it's just a shot of women looking up into the sky. But then when you go through it a third time, as you've kind of got the structure of the film, you realize that they're looking at the helicopter, and it adds just a moment of complexity to the story. And so now this shot of them looking up into the sky becomes meaningful. So it's a matter of not only just looking at the footage, but looking at it over and over and over again. Also, we realized that there was sound, in it, that a lot of times I think that people would have missed or missed, in whatever earlier film that were done. So where the guards yell, white power, after they take over, if you're not just looking at it in real time and listening, then that's something that you can easily miss. And so there were a bunch of things like that sound pieces of the archival that really helps tell the story and makes it much fuller a story.
I'm always so curious about how people see their roles as it relates to like creative work. And Traci, I know that you're also a journalist, studied journalism. So I'm curious if you see being a documentarian as the same thing as being a journalist. Are they one and the same? And if not, how do they differ for you?
I certainly think there's overlapping skills with both roles. I think just, in my experience as a journalist, in my background, you're sort of beholden to the demands of the news cycle. And not only that, you just don't really get a lot of time to sit with and chew on a story and really digest it. It's kind of there and then it's gone. Versus documentary work, you really do get that time to kind of go deep and tell a more nuanced layer story. You really get that time to do what I did with the Attica film, which is kind of talk to people and really get to know them, to gain their trust, because you get just what you get from them is so much richer when you've had that time to establish that relationship and sort of build that transparency. But I think one set of skills certainly feeds and helps and assists with the other. I mean, one of the ways that I found some of the people who were in the film was just combing through court records. As you see at the end of the film, there was a couple decades of litigation and there's records of all of that. So, just my instinct is as a journalist is to go to the records and dig through those things and see what you can find. And that really was a springboard for me into locating some of the folks and finally, digging through public records to search for them, and just that basic kind of journalistic skills that really, I think, paid off in this film.
Mhm. And what was it like to actually be in the room with folks as they shared their stories?
So first of all, let me say that I was both physically in the room and virtually in the room. So I think one of the things I'm proudest about in the film is that obviously we did this in a pandemic, and there came a point when it just was sort of untenable for us to travel long distances. This was, remember, at a point in the pandemic where we were like getting on planes. Is it okay? We don't know. So I would say about, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of the film we did do in person, but then another third, I did it just like I'm talking to you right now from my sofa on the Zoom. And then we would have a crew where that person lived go and sort of set up. And that's how we did it. But I will say that both for those interviews where it was like this and the ones in person, it was sitting with people as they recounted the defining trauma of their lives, and that wasn't just the people that were prisoners, it was everybody. I don't think there was a single interview I did where there weren't some level of very intense emotion, and emotion that was present in a way that you might not expect 50 years later. There was tears, there was rage, there was, just all of it that I think you see that comes through in the film. Was right there for people. And I just think that's a testament to the injustice, the fact that none of these people got justice. And so there is no closure. It stays with you. And just sort of the horrific trauma of what all of these people experienced on September 13th, 1971. So it was an intense experience, but it was my job, if we're asking them to share this with us for the sake of this film and the story being told, to really sit with them in it and allow them the space to experience it and express it, however was most authentic to them in that moment.
We are shown, or you show us, the very horrific images of the massacre at Attica, and in that way you invite us as audience members to look and we also linger on those images. And I know over the years there's been many conversations, maybe even before that, about traumatic images and what it means to share them and look at them, and is it too much, etc. I'm curious if you think that we as a society have the luxury to even say, I don't want to see that when it comes to those images.
That's an interesting question. I think that obviously, you can choose not to see the images. We thought it was really important that you see the images and that you understand the carnage and the horror that took place on that day. Certainly, we were very, very sensitive to what we show and how much we show. There were more horrific images that we didn't show. And in fact, after the film premiered at Toronto Film Festival, and we saw it on the big screen, we actually went back and changed a couple of photos because, they were, when you saw it on, we were on a small screen, but when you saw it on the big screen, it was just too much. I think you're really good at that and talking about that, the images and how the audience needed to see it.
Yeah, I think, when I think about this and particularly this story in the prison system, so there's a reason that prisons are hundreds of miles away from densely populated areas that don't have anything to do with protecting public safety. There's a reason that it's behind high walls. There's a reason that we, the public, are not allowed to see what is happening behind the prison walls, because if we really saw, and we really did, then we would have to kind of sit and reckon with what we are allowing in the names of our safety and have to ask difficult questions like, do does the caging of 2 million people actually make us more safe? So in the situation of our film, people have said to Stanley and I, and I'm sure, those of you watching tonight, I feel unsettled. I feel disturbed. It stayed with me. I couldn't sleep. And I say to that a couple of things. One, if what we are asking of the people in the film, for the sake of the audience learning about this story and for the sake of us telling it, is to recount it, the very least that we can do as filmmakers and as audiences is to sit with what it is that they saw and experienced firsthand. One. Two, I would say, to the point of what it is that we're allowing the state to do in our name, excuse me, 39 people were massacred by law enforcement at the behest of the state of New York, right? And so the narrative, as you see Nixon and Rockefeller crafting in the film, is like, this is necessary basically to control the Blackness and to restore law and order, right? And so if this is the line that the state is selling us and that we, the public, are buying, then we need to bear witness and see what it is that we are willing to allow. And so I think that, like Stanley said, was certainly a delicate balance, and we were very intentional about where that line was and what was over it. But I don't think you should be able to walk away from a film like this in which something happened like what did on September 13th and not have those images stay with you.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I mean, I think it's really interesting also, what people see as horrific, images. I mean, the thing that's pointed out to me the most, often by far, is the images of the prisoners stripped naked, nude, with their hands on top of their head. That's the image that sticks with people the most. It's not the images of the dead bodies and the blood. So I think it's part of the context, and what's horrific. And that's a really interesting question because, I mean, probably 10 to 1 people come up, or email or talking about the film, they talk about the nude shots of the former prisoners with their hands on their heads, nude.
Yeah. And your comments also make me think about, the tagline on your poster, "This is not history, this is America." And I'm curious if you think that we actually want to know our history. And maybe it goes back to what you were saying, Traci, about the reason why prisons are where they are. But what are your thoughts on that?
I feel like some people want, I'll let you talk, but I feel like some people want to know their history, and obviously some people don't want to know. But I think it's important for me and us as filmmakers to tell history, and to tell history as we do in Attica, in all its glory, all its terribleness. I mean, one of the things that I want people onto when they see the film is also, the first couple of days, where as the person organized and are as they say in the film, exuberant and that piece of film, you kind of forget that because of the horror of it is. But Traci.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so interesting, Nana, that you asked that question as we are in this moment right now, where there are people actively trying to strip stories like this from the history books, right? Like stories where the state is complicit in harm and violence against American people. And I feel like if we, are to really ever reckon with this, if we're to ever really find redress of this, if we're ever trying to get to this place of justice and restoration and freedom, then we have to be very clear-eyed about the realities of what this history is and quite frankly continues to be today. So to answer your question, I think that yes, people wouldn't want to forget, and I think our job as filmmakers and as storytellers is to not allow it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the old cliche, if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. But sometimes things are cliches because they're true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are several powerful moments in the film, but the one that really sticks with me is when Arthur Harrison, an inmate of Attica, talks about, watching the bloodshed and thinking, I've done a lot of bad things, I've seen a lot of bad things, but in this moment, this person is worse than me. And it also got me thinking about the kind of the nuance that you explore in the film of good and evil, and what is good and what is evil. As you work through the film, 2 years that it took to make the film, were there new revelations that came up for you? Both.
I think that one of the things, I mean, there are certain things that going into it, I knew the story that I knew we would find. I knew about the complicity of the governor in ordering the attack. I knew that he had been in conversation somehow with the president. I had not yet heard that recording that Nixon made of them talking, and it was revelatory to me, only because I find that when you're trying to kind of get your hands around stories of the way that this kind of racism works at the level of institutions and systems, and in this case, it is the governorship of the state of New York and the highest office, the U.S. presidency. It's hard to sometimes get your hand around, because it's not like, oh, someone's burning a cross on my lawn and there it is, right? Like, it's a little the way that power kind of uses race, and powerful systems use race, can be a little tricky. But here's a moment where we hear it, right? Like, this is how your like racist and power sausage gets made, and they are spelling it out right there, like undeniably. And so I think that was just things that were unexpected, that I came to the film not expecting, and then finding that was shocking to me. And it was a learning moment to me, because I think as Black people, we always sort of suspect that there's a phone call like that, or like a room somewhere where these conversations are happening, and we can't ever really point to there it is, but there it was, So I think that probably was one of the most revelatory moments just in the journey of making this film.
Yeah, I mean, I think also some of the things were really subtle, that we learned, so that we learned that the pain that Attica caused everybody involved is still right there. You see it on John Johnson's face. You see it on the former prisoner's face. When the hostage families break down. You see the pain. You see. So it's some of it. It's there, and that's a part of it, and we see it, and it's hard to describe. And you can, when you think about a film, you don't think that somebody's gonna, in your mind, oh, he's gonna then break down and cry, and the pain is gonna be so much there. And also, the beauty and the personalities of the prisoners that come through, and the personalities of the different people that come through. You can look at the idea on paper, but when you actually see it, it's just it's totally different. You always think of it like, you can write a script, right? But then when you hire, Denzel to read it, it becomes something different,
Yeah.
and it just changes, and it, in so many ways, when we put flesh to the story, it morphed into something very different, and more than at least I could have ever imagined.
Yeah. Sadly, there are reverberations of Attica today, like we said, and I'm thinking about even the events of a few summers ago and what we continue to see in terms of police brutality. But last year we were able to speak with Sam Pollard about his film MLK FBI, and I asked him, as a teacher and a mentor, kind of what he is saying or what he's asking of students with regards to using the archival images and the images and the videos that are coming out of this time. And so I'm curious for you both, kind of if you can shed any light or any advice to filmmakers and artists that will make stories of this time. What can they be thinking about or look to do?
I think it's telling stories and putting flesh to the stories, and one of the things that I would tell, everybody, is don't be afraid of emotion. That's what film does best. Is it in a way that nothing else can, I think, because it uses the written word, it uses images, it uses sound, it uses so many different things, and I think Attica is a real good example of a film that's visceral. Like when it's over, you feel something, and I think that's what film does best. And I think that um, don't be scared of that I think that so many times if we're talking about stories about the present day, and about what's happening, we want people to feel it, if especially want people to think about what we're talking about and to think about making change.
Yeah, I think for students and young people who are doing this work and aspire to do this work, I think the younger generation gets a lot of flack for like always having one of these right in your hand, right? But there's another side to that there's almost an instinctive drive because everybody has a camera to bear witness, right? So like we know about what happened to George Floyd because a young person did this, and so I mean I don't necessarily know that there's so much advice that I can offer because that feels like the right instinct, to continue to insist upon bearing witness, telling the story of what you see to the world, not trusting the official accounts, of what happened. I don't know if you've seen the official police report of what happened to George Floyd, but he basically killed himself, according to the police report. And so it was because a young person who picked up a camera and bore witness to what happened and told her story that we understood the truth of what happened there. So I would say, for young people who are filmmakers or students to just continue to follow that instinct when you have that moment of this is not right, or this is something that needs to be brought to light. So kind of follow your gut and your instinct and keep going until you've told that story that you can't let go.
And Stanley, to your point about when you watch Attica, it leaves you with something. You end the film with Clarence B. Jones saying that he will never, several nevers, forget Attica. And I'm curious if there's like a big ask or an action that you are asking of your audience when they see this film. Like, what do you hope they leave with or do?
That's an interesting question, but I have to say that I don't really make films for audiences to take one action. It's not a film where I mean you draw your own conclusions and you take your own actions. I think if you start to think about prisons more, and think about the 2 million people that are incarcerated, that's good enough. But I don't. We didn't make Attica to point to any one thing. You know, um, in a way, it's just a story, right? In a way, it's so much more than that, and you take from it, what you will, and I think that's the beauty, of film. You know you might be sitting next to somebody in the audience, and you take one thing away, and somebody else takes another.
Alex, we can open it up. Thank you very much. And take audience questions.
Thank you. It was very eye-opening, and thank you for putting all your energies and bringing this to us. My question was, after all this, were any improvements incorporated in all the wishes that they had asked? Were any of them at all incorporated in making the changes into the prison?
I believe in the immediate aftermath, there were some small, mostly cosmetic changes, certainly not, the institutional level reforms that the prisoners were really seeking. Interestingly enough, today there's about 2,000 cameras inside Attica, which feels like a big improvement. However, that happened because I believe in 2014, a prisoner was beaten almost to death by 3 guards at Attica. I believe it was the first time a prison guard had ever in the state been prosecuted for violence against a prisoner. And when that was exposed, because it was not reported immediately, that was the prison's response, was to install these cameras. So I guess you could say that that is an improvement and will probably go a long way to reducing some of the violence. But mind you, this is nearly 50 years after the fact. So that violence that the prisoners talked about in the film continued at the same level or worse. And that's just one prison where that happened. So think about that, repeated however many times in prisons throughout the country. And, not only that things overall not get better at Attica, but the whole system has just gotten exponentially bigger and therefore less just and worse, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the prison population has exploded to where there's over 2 million people in prison, here in New York, Rikers Island, and, every other day, because horrible conditions at Rikers Island. There was an article a couple of weeks ago about a prison in, I believe it's in California. I believe the town is Janesville. And if you Google Janesville and the New York Times, it'll pop up or prisons about they're trying to close the prison in that town, and the townspeople have risen up and have an injustice against closing the prisons because their livelihood is based on the prison, and it's just such an echo of what happened, of the town of Attica and how it's still playing out all over the country today.
Hi, my name is Natasha. I just want to say thank you so much for making the film. It was really moving, and it's obviously a really important story. And yeah, just thank you. My question is, so you included the perspective of one of the National Guard men, and I was wondering if you ever thought of including like any officers or any of them or any of the guards, and what your process was on that.
Yes. So as I said earlier, we definitely were intending to tell a 360-degree story, and that obviously include the guards who both worked at the prison and were held hostage. I spoke with 4 of them, as well as their spouses who were around at that time. And we had every intention to film them and put them in the film. And they, for their own reasons, decided shortly before we were scheduled to film them to not participate in the film.
Thank you very much for showing the film. And I have a question. As your film goes back almost 50 years back history, you might have a little easy access to get some of the footage from the authority. Now, as you mentioned that there are 2,000 cameras in place, how difficult it will be to get such kind of footage, or they will have access to filmmakers?
I would guess probably impossible, but that's just speculation on my part. I don't think it's meant to be. The intention of that at all is to be for public consumption.
And the footage, the naked mans and all, those were real or recreated?
Oh no, that was all real. That was all real footage.
Yeah, there's no recreations in a film at all. It's all real.
Yeah, so keep in mind the as you see during the credits, there was 20 plus 25, 30 years of litigation on behalf of the prisoners before they got their settlement. And so in all that time, that was a lot of time to collect evidence in those lawsuits. And so the photographs that you see in that sequence on the 13th were all part of the evidence that had been collected in the lawsuits on behalf of the prisoners. And we were fortunate enough to get access to that material.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's kind of interesting is, you know, we had thought of using some recreations, and actually, you know, there were recreations from some films that had been done years ago that had of the takeover of Attica, and we had a couple of them cut in, and we realized that you know, it just took away from the reality of the film. If we used even one of them, so that it made our job a little harder. But you know, that if we took out all the recreations, you just would relate to the film in a different way. So there are no recreations of the film.
Hello, hi, my name is Tony, and my question is related to your previous question you just answered. Is it true that most of this or all of this real footage has never been shown publicly?
I wouldn't say most of it. I would say that a lot of it has not been shown publicly. A lot of it was just, you know, so that, you know, NBC News, CBS News, ABC, you know, were there filming, and you know, when we started getting film from them, they gave us everything, and a lot of the stuff might not have been seen before. So we really don't know what had been seen, but certainly there was a lot of material that had not been used and had not been seen before. But I don't think that it was, I mean, probably, you know, at least half of it or more had been seen in some way or the other, you know, at some time or the other. But it's never been kind of gathered and put together in the same way that we did.
Okay, that's it for questions. Thank you both so much for your time. I'm a fan, so I'm so excited.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Lisa Lehman said to say hi.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much for joining us, especially for such the late hour. It's really special to have you join us virtually. And good luck with the short list.
Thank you so much.
See you, Alex. All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Good
All right,
night.
Good night.
guys.